Welcome to the Content Podcast, conversations with Silicon Valley's creatives. I'm Daniel Garcia, your host and the cultivator of Content Magazine, published by SV Creates. This episode of the Content Magazine podcast is brought to you by Bonfire, a Silicon Valley digital agency building elevated websites for ambitious brands. Find out more about Bonfire at bonfire.com.
Hi, this is Shannon.
Today we talk with Shannon Guggenheim. She's one of the co-owners and operators of 3Below theaters in San Jose. Hey Shannon, this is Daniel. How are you doing?
Hey, so good to talk to you.
I know it has been a long time, and I'm sure this has been a very, very interesting year for you.
Yeah, and we are all saying that, right? A year, and now here it is, a year and a month, and it's going to
I
be a year
know.
and 2 months. It's remarkable. It's unprecedented, as we keep saying.
Yeah, totally. Well, I have to say that you and Scott, in many ways, are superheroes to me. I think, even moving into the theater, the 3Below theater, to get there, you had a number of hurdles, right?
For
to get
sure,
to do
always.
the build out and with the city and all to get that kind of going, and then for COVID to kind of hit, and from the sidelines just seeing what you're doing, like you decided to do the up on the garage, where I thought that was such a great idea. Of course then it got locked up some more, but so I just want to thank you on behalf of me being a downtowner for your effort to bring entertainment to the neighborhood. I really appreciate it, so thank you to you and
Oh,
Scott.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe it's already been as long as it has, because it sometimes just feels like not too long ago. You know how that kind of works.
Yeah.
Learning that the venue was an option, through our longtime colleague Jack Nybloom of the Camera Cinemas,
Hmm.
and having him kind of say, what can you guys do in there? Can you take the reins and do something? We've got ComedySportz. We don't want them to leave. We'd love to keep independent movies going, but we know you've got other things. And Scott and I said, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you probably do know this, but it's probably filed somewhere in the back. We had a venue in the South Bay for a few
Yeah.
years. It was called the Retro Dome.
Yeah.
And there was a big hiatus between its demolition in January 2013 to our first production in 3Below theaters in January of 2018.
Yeah.
So we definitely had 5 years of storing a bunch of stuff, thinking, well, we might need it, so don't get rid of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when this became an option, it's funny. We sort of outgrew the venue before we even moved in. We always knew that was going to be an issue.
Sure. Yeah.
Needing rehearsal space and storage space and place to build things. Any theater company is going to grapple with that. So
Yeah.
that's been a challenge, but we have exploited every square inch out of that building since we've moved in.
Yeah.
And I would say the one thing that hasn't quite happened yet, because I feel like, with most startups, it's that 3-year thing, right? If you can
Yeah.
survive the first year, you're good. And there's that second year of, challenge. But you get that third year. Well, this, 2020 would have been our third year. So we don't even
Yeah.
really know where we were headed. And we were
Yeah.
just making relationships with the community. We were just creating relationships with restaurants and apartment buildings and hotels. And
Yeah.
like, they knew we were there, but we didn't have that footing of, all right, they're here for the long haul. They're going to be around. So I'm excited to see kind of where this next few months goes, and we'll get to this in a second. But although we've just started showing movies again, we are already
Yeah.
seeing our regulars, which is wonderful.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yeah. So yeah, you had the Retro Dome, and then that was did you guys actually own it, and then it was slated, or you're leasing it from the city, and then it was slated to be, well,
Uh-huh.
it's been destroyed.
Yeah,
Yeah, tell me about
exactly.
how you got into that space.
Sure. Um, you know, it's it's such a story. I think a lot of our regulars and our colleagues know we have two adorable daughters, and our
Hmm.
second born, Allie, was surprisingly born with severe disabilities. And
Hmm.
so in 2007, when she was born, we realized our life was really going to have to change. I mean, up until then, we'd been touring. You know, we would
Yeah.
take productions as far south as San Diego, as far north as we were heading up to Sacramento, and we were in the city. We would do tours that would go out of the state, sometimes, and we were just going. We can't sustain this. We've got to
Yeah.
plant some real roots. And all of her doctors were at Packard, and she needed constant PT and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
we kind of started looking and going, well, what could we, what are we going to do? And we had some offers in San Francisco, and I just kind of felt like we've got to be in suburbia. It's just hard, to be in a big city with a disabled kid. And we didn't even know what
Yeah.
we were up against at that point. She was so
Yeah.
young, and I'm glad we made the decision we did. So one day we were at Westgate Shopping Center and happened to park on that end, saw a little
Mhm.
sign in the window of the dome, and read
Wow.
that they were done. They'd closed up, go see the movies here or somewhere else, whatever it was. And we just kind of stared at each other and we went, maybe we could do something. And we had this great relationship with shopping centers because that's what was our bread and butter all through the
Yeah. Yeah.
90s. We would produce holiday entertainment for Easter, Christmas, not Thanksgiving, Halloween, July 4th, all the big holidays. We
Yeah.
would be out there. But the day after Thanksgiving, you'd find us in a shopping center with, dancing elves and Santa's arrival. So we knew the malls, and we knew Federal Realty, which is who owns Westgate. And we called our contact, and they said, well, we're going to demolish it. It's not going to happen right away. So if you want to, do something, what do you have in
Yeah.
mind? And we,
Yeah.
then we went in, we looked around. We didn't know at the time when we first conceptualized things that it was split. So I don't, for your listeners, sometimes these domes are one big room, other
Right.
times they're bisected. And that's what this one was. So on the
Right.
right, there was a, 300 seat theater. On the left, there was a 300 seat theater. And we just went, well, that changes things,
Yeah.
because when you think you're going to do theater, you want a nice big space. But honestly, a 300 seat intimate theater is a rare find in this
Yeah.
area.
Yeah. It's great.
So we went on a family trip on July 4th weekend, and Scott and Steve and their dad and I sat at the table signing the lease on this thing.
Wow.
And on September 4th, we opened. And
Oh,
so in 3 months, which is still remarkable, I can't believe we had the energy because
wow.
based on how I feel now. But yeah,
Right.
in 3 months,
Yeah.
we completely, with obviously the help of many, many people, renovated the space, paint. There were no chairs, so we had to we had an arrangement with Sayufi, and they said, "Yeah, come around to all the theaters that we're demolishing,"
Yeah.
and we kind of harvested the first 2 rows of over a dozen theaters.
Yeah.
And that gave us what we needed. The thinking being, of course, the first 2 rows of chairs were the least used. Nobody wants to sit there, right?
Yeah. That's
So they
smart.
were all in pretty decent shape. And God, I love the people who even thought, yeah, we could do that. And so we've got this crew of guys, and they are loading in 625 chairs into this building. We
Yeah.
built a stage. We
Yeah.
put up a new screen on the one side, and everything else, a
Yeah.
cafe and a box office. And yeah, it was really
Yeah.
something. And the thing was, though, we always knew at any time they
The
could
building.
say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were on a 3-month lease the whole time.
Oh,
Um,
really?
and it made it really hard to plan, right? We couldn't plan a summer camp because what if we told them in January we were going to have a camp for kids, and then
Yeah.
in April they said, "Oh, sorry, your lease is up," right? We didn't want to be in that position.
Right.
But we made the best of it, and really, we learned so much. I mean, we've run venues in other places in the Bay Area, but this one was, really ours. We weren't renting, or I was.
Right. You could
We
be
were
there.
renting, but we could. It was really ours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we made the best of it. Had a professional live musical series. Had the retro movies. Did some
Yeah.
classes, and then they said, "Time's up," and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so then you and Scott actually met in theater, and your both your kind of like life experiences more with kind of like live theater and then events and then teaching theater as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean that's the thing is you're bringing such a unique offering because there's, films and then also doing live productions, theater productions in the theater as well.
Yeah,
It's
we
awesome. Yeah.
realized that. sometimes, and I don't mean to be critical, but a lot of times the reason that performing arts groups struggle to survive is because they're often kind of a one trick pony, right? They do one
Yeah.
thing really, really well. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, audiences today, it's just a totally new way of approaching arts. People
Yeah.
want a lot of things, and they want to get it from a lot of places. They want, something new. And we realized a long time ago we couldn't just do the thing we love. We have to learn
Right.
other things too and make sure that we've got a lot of different things to offer. And that was kind of the real attraction to 3Below, or then Camera Cinemas, was that
Mhm.
there are three different theaters. So
Yeah.
borrowing from our experience of running the Retrodome, we knew what worked. We knew how to program these spaces to make sure
Yeah.
that they're pretty much, when we're fully operational, they're pretty much active every day of the year, all day long.
Yeah.
Because you wake up in the morning, you've got the crew in there, doing a rehearsal, and then in the afternoon the movies start or classes start, and then at
Yeah.
night you've got more movies or there's a live show happening. And that's just in our two theaters. And then, of course, ComedySportz is operating their classes and
Yeah.
shows all month long too. So add to
Yeah.
that the cafe concept. We didn't really think about all of that when we first moved in, but there was a restaurant in the front
Yeah.
corner. So we suddenly realized, wow, not only are we running a professional musical theater, with union actors, and we're running a or an independent movie concept,
Right.
and we've got Jeff with ComedySportz, and now we're going to run a restaurant. This is great. Three businesses all at once. So it
Well,
really
that's
was three startups all at the same time.
that's why I say that you guys are superheroes. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah. So, well, then you must be excited. I mean, like, I think it's last week you opened up, right?
We
You
did.
just opened up for
Yeah.
theaters, and of course, it's limited space or some kind of, you know, um, how did that feel to have the doors, like to open the door?
It's it's hard to talk about it without feeling like a summation of the whole last year has to inform that. But
Mm,
it really was like inhaling and exhaling at the same time. And
yeah.
I don't it's a strange
Mhm.
description, but it was this inhale of, we're doing this and this is insane that we're going to try and get back up on our feet. And then it was this
Yeah.
exhale of, we're in the right direction at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last year, and I know I speak for every arts group, because we were the first to close and we're probably going to be the last to open. Movies, for whatever
Yeah.
reason, are on that list of, sure, you can start opening with limits and guidelines and everything. And live theater is still sitting here going, hello.
Yeah.
Dance, music, orchestras, they're all like, right. And you spend the year kind of going, well, we're planners. We run on opening dates, closing dates,
Yeah.
and what the
Yeah.
next schedule item is. And okay, we're planning a year out. You're planning 18 months out. In the
Right.
case of, the CPA, they're 2 years, even more in some cases, booking these groups.
Yeah.
So the idea of it being mid-March of 2020 and thinking, well, I mean, how long could this go on? A
Right.
couple of months, maybe? All
Yeah.
right, well, we'll just kind of zhuzh everything forward. So
Yeah.
everyone sat at their computer and redid their production calendar and
Yeah.
rebooked actors and, figured out, are we going to have musicians available? And, everyone's kind of like waiting, on ice, just kind of holding up. And then
Yeah.
June came and we're going, all right, well, we're not really talking about a postponement anymore on these
Yeah.
four productions. Now we're canceling. And then we're moving into fall going, wow, we're
Yeah,
still
and how do
sitting
you
here.
book? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and set up, yeah.
And
Yeah.
we saw a lot of our colleagues announce, and they had to pull back. They got everybody all excited and then reeled back. So I know that must have been excruciating for, and we're different. We're kind of a different breed, than some of our contemporaries. We're
Mhm.
rather autonomous. We don't have a
Yeah.
board. We've got a really great landlord situation. So it wasn't exactly the same. We don't have a massive staff. In a lot of cases,
Yeah.
other groups have big teams that, you know losing the income to pay your team is was excruciating. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we were lucky. We were able to use some of the PPP, and then we had some
Right.
unemployment, and then things kicked back up, and then yeah, that led to Up on the Roof, which we can talk a bit about if you want.
Yeah, which was fun. I mean, and this is the thing too, is like, I thought that was great. I mean, everybody, was pivoting and you
Yeah.
guys pivot. I was thinking, what a great idea. One, uh, because we were thinking about what we're going to do for a pickup party. And the first thing I said, let's do it in a parking lot, right? We kind of ran into some red tape and we said, you know what, let's not do it. And then I saw you guys were going to do it up on the parking lot. That's great. And then also, then we had those big windy days and came in. And then I was just thinking, like, Scott and Shannon are, you
Nuts.
guys are like the poster children for perseverance, or you know what I mean? In some way, I don't
Yeah.
know what it is, but yeah. So we'll talk about that. What was the? I mean, I imagine that it was necessity, right? Okay, we have to
A
have an
little bit.
offering. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Scott and I have been together since 1990. We're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this July.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
if there's one thing I know about Scott, he needs purpose.
Mm.
We read The Missing Piece. Do you know that book? It's Shel Silverstein. It's ancient
Oh.
now.
Oh, really?
It's a wonderful read. And the idea is that there's this Pac Man shaped character kind of rolling through life looking for its missing piece. And some
Hmm.
of the little pieces that he merged with were too small, some were too big, and so on. But the end of the story, the idea was, well, what's it about? And it was about finding your purpose.
Mm.
And for Scott, he's always known what his purpose is. I mean, I do too, but I've had to kind of uh, be more
Had to-
transition like, go
Sure.
from being an actor to a choreographer to the box office manager to the graphic designer back to the actor and to the special needs parent. It's much
Yeah.
more Bartholomew Cubbins and his many hats, right?
Yeah.
But for Scott, he's just like, I drive, I produce. This is what we do. We got to be up, we got to do stuff. So
Yeah.
um when everything went black, completely down. We knew we
Yeah.
weren't doing anything. He started to conceptualize, well, what could we do over the summer? And that Up on the Roof program was supposed to be a summer jam, but it took
Yeah.
that long to figure it out. And it was a massive endeavor. And
Right.
I mean, everybody involved was amazing because there was this sense of we have to do something. The people need something. They can't
Right.
just sit at home watching TV. They want to get out and do something. So between the city of San Jose, the mayor's office, our council person's office,
Yeah.
the downtown association. I'm sure I'm
Yeah.
forgetting somebody, but every single department worked together to try and figure out a way to make this work. And
Yeah.
it did take time. It took a little bit of time, and I think that was the hardest thing for Scott and I was a lot of our fans kept writing and saying, "Hey, the streaming thing is really where it's at. Everybody's producing
Yeah.
content. Why aren't you doing that?" And I'm
Yeah.
going, "I'm so glad that people can do that, but it was completely impractical with Ellie. She
Yeah.
just that's not the life that we can lead. She needs
Yeah.
24/7 care." So we were just kind of tag teaming, and God love
Right.
her, our oldest daughter Lily, her college plans were completely disrupted. She's still at home, but
Yeah.
thankfully at school, in her bedroom. So between the
Yeah.
three of us, we've kept Allie alive another year, and it's not easy, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of trying to really produce something consistent in that way was challenging. But with Up on the Roof, we knew it was going to be a limited thing because, like I said, it was supposed to be in the summer. So every week that went by, the setting was getting shorter, right?
Right.
We're
Yeah.
looking at the weather and we're looking at the what we know about the Bay Area, going, "Whoo, man, we're really cutting it close by heading into November." And
Yeah.
that was as far as we could go. I think November 2nd was our last screening. But as you mentioned, the week prior, there was that
Yeah.
massive windstorm blew through the screen that we, got for the occasion. Our
Yeah.
amazing costume designer is out there the next morning stitching the darn thing up so we can get through four more movies. It
Yeah.
was just,
Yeah.
it's nuts, and I know that that after probably interviewing so many creative people, we really, we're all cut from a cloth that's like, well, we're not going to give
We
up.
could
The
do it.
show
Yeah.
must go on. We gotta,
Exactly.
we gotta do it. I got a barn. You got the costumes. We'll put on a show.
Right.
So in
Exactly.
that case, we had the roof and we had the cafe downstairs. We had the bathrooms. So it really worked. And, everyone's asking, can we do it again this year?
Right. I was gonna ask that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And we've started the wheels in motion, but I feel like with planning during this time, it's like man plans, God laughs.
Yeah.
you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
because even if we start rolling things, we're like, well, wait a minute. Well, what if the tiers change? But on the other hand, we're opening more. Maybe we're going to go from
Right.
25% to 50% indoors. But then will the people even come? So maybe we should go
Yeah.
back upstairs. It has been just back and forth and back and forth. So we're just taking it
Yeah.
a day at a time. That's really
Yeah.
all you can do is just one day at a time, go on the information that you've got. And that's what we have for right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, I it's funny because 3Below for me is so connected with COVID because it was on March 17th, Tom McHenry's play was supposed to open,
Right.
right? So I was planning on coming to that 'ca it was interesting because we knew people involved in it, and then it didn't happen. And
Yep.
so every time I think of COVID and it started, I always remember March 17th, 3
Yeah.
Below, you know what I mean? So it's very much connected with that.
Yeah, and we weren't the only ones who had a show opening. I mean, there were definitely big Broadway, shows that were that was their opening night, that kind of thing
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And locally there were a bunch of groups, but yeah, I mean, Tom had worked so hard to bring this to life, and so did our team, and the actors were
Yeah.
literally sitting on stage in their costumes on the 16th going,
Oh,
"So we
what do
just
we
don't
do?
come back tomorrow?" I mean, learning an entire show and then just not doing it.
Yeah.
That's just not what
Yeah.
actors do. Like people who play soccer, same thing, right? You
Yeah.
practice soccer because you want to go play the game. You don't just practice
Yeah.
soccer all the time, right? You
Yeah.
want to have an end result. So, and it was weird. And there was a level of fear too, because it was early when nobody knew what was going on. So people were starting to
Yeah.
get uncomfortable about coming to rehearsals because we just kept plowing forward. We were obviously
Yeah.
being
Because nobody
careful,
knew
but
exactly.
we just
Yeah.
didn't know. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
hindsight.
I know it was funny. My daughter, she's a senior at Lincoln, and so she got a pretty good part in this play that they were gonna be doing,
Oh,
last year. Well, she's a senior this year, so she was a junior, and they were rehearsing. They were doing all these. I mean, she was every day. That same thing, like every day
yeah.
after school until late, and they were getting ready to launch, and then same thing. And I forget how many lines or pages she was on it, and
Oh,
then
sure.
yeah, it's very interesting. Now, so then for you, for I'm what specifically just within this last year? I mean, you've obviously have had learned a lot about life in your last, I guess, like I would say 40 years of being
Oh,
alive.
thank you.
Um, but what was this last year? Maybe something that you learned about yourself that was new.
Yeah. Um, I think probably the first thing that happened was I realized how much we needed a break.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
I I sort of joke about it because
Hmm.
I think like the week before everything happened, I said to Scott, sometimes I feel like we are never going to get a break until the world just grinds to a complete halt.
You
So it's my
caused
fault.
it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's true. And we, yeah, for me in particular, I've really run the gamut of emotions. It's almost like, like the phases of grief that they talk about.
Right.
That
Yeah.
really has kind of been what it's been like because I've felt a huge amount of guilt for not doing more, not
Mm.
doing, streaming
Yeah.
content and trying to do more,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Guilt for the ticket buyers who are like,
Right.
well, we're just going to let you have our money until we hear from you. I mean, that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what happened was, and this is why if this thing had been like kind of locked up in like 3 months, we'd all be good. But now we've had a year to reflect and go, well,
Mhm.
this kind of semi-retired thing is not so
Right.
bad for
Right.
those of
Exactly.
us, and I do preface, I am fully aware that everybody's pandemic summer vacation has been very different. You've got
Totally.
people who did not get to stay home and bake. They did not
Right.
get to spend time with their kids in an enjoyable way in some
Right.
cases, So I'm so aware of that. And yeah, I mean, we had really close colleagues who they just had to go get jobs. They're like, I'm working, I'm delivering for Amazon, I'm doing
Yeah.
Uber because they had to just survive. And meanwhile,
Yeah.
we're just like sitting here taking care of kids. And that obviously is a
Yeah.
big job, but it's a different way of getting through month after month of what's coming. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of kind of what could life look like not working the kind of hours that we were.
Yeah.
Um, there were big conversations right before the pandemic that were really kind of starting like these burgeoning conversations about the worth of artists, how they're paid,
Mm.
can they
Yeah.
survive in this area on the incomes that they could ever hope to make? And
Right.
those were kind of just getting started, and this really put a fine point on it. We've got, dear friends that we've worked with for years, and the notion of them going, well, I just can't keep doing this. I've got to
Yeah.
move. I've moved. So they've moved back home to Florida. They've gone other places.
Yeah.
So that was hard to watch. And yeah, I think coming out on the other side of it, although we're still nowhere near done, the the evolution for me was realizing, I think, I don't know that we will ever be able to measure the full impact of the um, the hardship for people who are creative
Mm.
when we had no outlet. So
Right.
you've got people who they don't use that part of their brain the way that creative people do. It's just very different. And I think for those of us who spend our lives, all of our days, because theater people don't just go to theater for 5 hours a day and then stop. It's all we
Right.
do, because we're probably teaching and taking classes and writing a show and being in a show and rehearsing a show.
Yeah.
So it's always creating, and having days and then weeks and then months go by of not creating. I
Yeah.
didn't realize how much it wore on me, and it was surprising. It was really surprising. And this is
Mm.
a ridiculous segue into how Scott and I like parlayed these, days of not knowing what to do. Allie had to sit there as we, found ways to keep busy, and we created a mural of posters, I guess you could
Huh.
call it, for one of
Cool.
the theaters. So if people haven't been into 3Below for a while, we have our
Oh,
flag.
you ho
Oh,
with the banner on the top where you changed the names of all the plays or the productions, the
mm,
musicals and stuff, that is that what you're talking about?
oh, no, yeah, that's the marquee,
The
which is
marquee,
which is
yeah,
great.
yeah,
No, no, no. So when you come into the theater, we've got the 3 spaces. ComedySportz is
mhm,
in theater 1, theater 2 is movies, it's got a screen, and theater 3 has the screen and the stage. So theater 2 has kind of always been this little odd room. It's
yeah,
kind of too small to be a place where you wanna see, a movie, but it's also a really great place to see a movie, because the sound is amazing, it's really intimate. But we knew we needed to do something to kind of perk up this space. And like many people, one of the things we did use our time doing was cleaning and purging and trying to get organized and be ready to roll as soon as things
yeah,
came back to life.
right.
And we have been drowning in a sea of movie posters at the theater. They just send them,
Oh,
and they send a lot. They send four or
sure.
five per film, and there's 4 or 5 films per week, and suddenly you've got a lot of posters. And I was like, Scott, we can do something with these. Let's figure out something creative. And this project that we thought would take a week took 4 times that. And suddenly we've got an entire wall. The back wall of theater
Oh,
2
awesome.
is now columns of rolled movie posters, and they're in kind of a
Oh.
color chromatic thing. And then one column is all eyes, like pairs of actors'
Oh,
eyes
wow.
rolled right at the right place on the poster. And
Oh
so
my
there's just
goodness.
this sea of beautiful eyes. You can see Judy Dench in there, and other people.
That's
Um,
awesome.
and then yeah, it was really satisfying. I felt like we were kind of going, yeah, we needed this. We needed something to
Yeah.
focus on, something that was creative, and then we decided to take it to the next level. So also in theater too, when people come, they'll get a bit of a surprise. We've decorated the sidewalls with an immense amount of TV and theater memorabilia.
Oh, wow.
And I kind of
Cool.
wonder, like, are people going to walk in and go, did they own all this stuff? Or
Where did this
or
come from?
worse, are they gonna say, "Did they buy all this stuff?" Um, yeah, no, we really did own a lot of it,
It
we
sounds like you can park your car in your garage now.
Right, yeah, exactly. No, almost. Yeah, so we've had, our first apartment looked like Jerry's Deli. We had, show cards covering all the walls.
Yeah, cool.
We're Disney fans, so we had all the kind of, kitschy things, and there's some Star Trek and, all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then because of the shows that we've done, we would often theme the lobby to make that a fun, interactive location. So when we did the musical You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, we had a bunch of fun Charlie Brown stuff. And when we did Xanadu, we had roller skates. So all of
Yeah.
that
Wow.
stuff has made its way onto, I think, 2 dozen shelves in the theater. And
Oh,
when the
cool.
movie's done, the lights come up and you can just sit there and look at all the fun stuff. We've got movie posters and movie reels and, vintage book covers and yeah, all kinds of fun stuff. And
Cool.
then,
I can't wait to check it out. That sounds really
yeah,
cool.
And
Yeah.
then we just kind of let the creativity spill out into the lobby. So next time you're downtown, pass by our window. If we're not open, just peek in, and we've really transformed it. And it's so fun. And we've always wanted that to be a space that was, just really light and enjoyable. So there's a 50s, a 60s, a 70s, and an 80s zone. And
Wow.
the only thing we spent money on to make this room really what we wanted it to be was we got a Miss Pac-Man video game to
Oh,
go in our
cool.
80s area. So next time you come, you got to challenge me because I'm really good at it.
Oh, I'm not very good at it. Yeah. So now, and then you're still in, you're still in the productions yourself too. Like you were still acting and performing in some of the shows you guys were doing, correct?
Correct. And I think this might answer your previous question a little bit better about like what living through this year has maybe made me realize or made me see. And I I think generally I try to stay pretty positive, and certainly in an
Hmm.
interview like this, I want to share all the good stuff and all the fun stuff. But
Yeah.
it's been challenging. It's been hard to kind of wake up every day and watch
Yeah.
the death toll increase. That is hard to watch. We haven't personally known anybody that was affected, but we certainly know many who are affected in other ways because of the
Yeah.
pandemic. And then just not taking care of myself the way that I probably did when I was working, even though working full time and the stress, maybe not eating well, there was still a wellness component because otherwise you can't function. And then
Yeah.
once this all started to happen, between the lack of creativity, the challenge of taking care of kids at home with no daycare and no school, the worry, the fear, it just, it beats you up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no amount of creative poster rolling was going to prevent the the amount of Nutella I was consuming. And so
Yeah.
as the year wore on, I've gained weight. I've felt like I
Yeah.
just don't want to be the face person anymore. And
Mm.
that's I've wondered that as I've watched some of these more popular like Hollywood actors and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah.
Like, how are they doing this? Or how are they staying in shape? How are these Broadway actors who are like, well, any day they could call and say, okay, the show's back on. Are they ready? And the mental
Right.
toll this has taken. And it's definitely been, it was a huge dip, like right around, well, really during Up on the Roof. I was kind of like, Scott, you're on your own. I'm going to stay home and take care of the kids.
Oh,
You got
yeah.
to run the thing. I'll do the box office. I'll make the posters. I'll make every sound really awesome, but I can't be there. I can't be out. I can't be
Yeah.
with people because I just didn't feel like me anymore. And I finally feel, maybe it's because we've reopened, that part of me of being a host, being somebody to invite people into our home and to make them feel welcome and to give them some joy for an hour and a half. I'm hoping I can still be that person, but it's interesting to kind of reflect on this
Yeah.
year and go, yeah, but if you'd asked me that 6 months ago, I was done. I'm like, Scott, whatever shows you're picking, I'm not in them. I can't do it. I'm
Hmm.
sore, I'm old, I'm tired, I'm fat, I'm ugly. I don't want to do any of those things because
Oh,
this
yeah.
weight, right? It wears on you, and it starts to sound a little fluffy and superficial compared to the bigger picture things. So I don't want to minimize, you
No,
know,
but
but
that's
we're
health.
all on our
That's
own
yeah.
path, right? Yeah, we're all kind of dealing with this in our own ways, and it is a lot. But I'm optimistic. It's kind of the first
Yeah.
time. Maybe spring helped. Seriously,
Yeah. Totally.
birds and flowers and whatever, it makes you feel a little better. And honestly, getting your email was like, okay, people are trying. There's a rallying action
Yeah.
happening about, let's not forget, let's not forget how hard it was, but let's also move forward. And the response
Yeah.
we've gotten from our regulars kind of saying, we're so glad that you're not you know ending things. We're so glad that you're going to persevere and try and keep going. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I know it's funny. I mean, I remember a time when I was like in this real kind of depressed state for a couple of years, and a friend of mine was kind of going through it too, so we kind of commiserated together. But he told me one time, he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "Sometimes you know it's only hearing the birds in the morning that gets me out of bed." And so you mentioned that about spring and the birds, and it just reminded me of just like, yeah, sometimes it's just those small little glimpse of hope that kind of keeps you going. So,
Right.
I mean, and I have to say, I mean, from I am so glad that you to see that you guys were opening because I think for, as a downtowner and, being around people downtown, I know like Uproar has just closed
Yeah,
and, Heinz from Forager right in the beginning, he saw that he couldn't do it. And then and then the Culinary Corner
right.
closed, which was so, yeah, there's a lot of fallout, that's happening. So I applaud you and Scott for, hanging in there. And I know it hasn't been easy, but there's
Yeah.
birds.
There's
There's birds
birds.
singing.
Yep. And, if the last 25 years have proved anything, it's that Scott's got purpose and he will find a way to, provide for our family and, take me along for the ride. And I support him and I get to, be part of a woman-owned business, in some
Yeah.
ways. And,
Yeah.
there's a lot of great things that came out of it. I, you know,
Yeah.
the other thing I think I wanted to just, I don't know, think about was this idea that as we move forward, there's a whole other component right now that artists have to be aware of, and we definitely tried to infuse that in our Up on the Roof programming. Um, this balance
Yeah.
of racial inequity compared to American theater.
Hmm.
There's some fascinating conversations happening right now about what American theater is and how it
Hmm.
is by design perhaps not as inclusive as we want it to be. And
Yeah.
that is probably second to Allie. It is the
Hmm.
thing we have talked about the most. Our oldest is
Hmm.
a poli-sci major, so she's fully tuned into the news, which means we're watching a lot of constant conversation about,
Yeah.
certainly, I mean, the incident with George Floyd last year did affect
Yeah.
us
Yes.
distantly. The protests went down the street. We lost some windows. There was a fire in front of the building, and I
Yeah.
remember posting saying, this is a shame. Thank you for your concern. We're all fine, but if this is what it takes to make some change, let's
Right.
let's do it. And somebody was like, "What? So you're just okay with people breaking your building because of, and I'm like, "Yeah, see, this is the conversation we need to have, guys.
Right.
We don't get to tell them how to protest. We don't get to tell an entire community how to be regarded when so much is happening. So, as much as it is difficult for us, I'm a white woman, Scott's a white man, our third partner in this, Steve, is a white guy. Our
Mhm.
parents are white, our costumer is white. It's hard. I do sit here sometimes going, how can we be change makers? How can we do anything
Yeah.
when, we can't change that?
Yeah.
So, but we can pay attention, we can really make sure that we're not just being open, but actively making some change in that regard.
Yeah.
The film festival that we did, back in November, it was all about that. We were showing movies that were new or old about Black Lives Mattering, the Asian American influence in film, female directors,
Yeah.
gay and lesbian themes. And it's what we can do. We had to
Right.
find the ways that we can do something. So I can't change my ethnicity to
Sure.
accommodate the fact that there's another black owned business downtown, but I can make sure that we are not just putting out an announcement saying we're casting actors. We can actively go and say, look,
Yeah.
we really want everybody who is qualified for this position to apply, and obviously the best people will be cast for whatever the reasons are that they make sense in those roles. And our
Yeah.
film selection, Scott's curating all of what you're seeing in the film listings, and he is making sure, to really be sure that we're, not just showing white movies and not just showing
Yeah.
movies created by men or, whatever the things are that, the marginalized communities, that we can try and make some change, small little bits, little
Yeah.
flutters of the butterfly. Hopefully those ripples, they do something.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a sense, especially moving forward, I guess, as you're reopening, that you guys are looking into program that would have, kind of like diversity, inclusion, and equity and what you're doing. Is that what you're saying? Is you're making an intentional effort to move in that direction?
Correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've been planning for months now to release an audition announcement that is basically like, we don't know what we're doing, but we know we're going to do something. So let's meet you now. Send us a video. Let's do an interview.
Cool.
Let's get to know people so that as we start planning, because, like, here's the thing, we're not going to announce that we're producing in the Heights, right? I mean, because if I'm the choreographer and Scott's the director and Steve's musical directing, we're not going to, we can't own that story. We can't
Right.
tell the in the Heights story and expect that it would be appropriate.
Mhm.
So then you go, well, then, so then do you only do shows that make sense
Right.
to you? So it's a challenge,
Yeah.
but there are ways to make this work, right? You start choosing shows that don't have to have certain ethnic. I'm just talking about white, not
Yeah.
everything else, obviously. But and it's not going to be easy for us right away. We are definitely going to have to work on it because frankly, we haven't met a lot of actors of color in the professional setting. I know they're out there, but
Yeah.
maybe we're not on their radar yet. So that's something we're
Sure.
working on. And I'll be honest, the first couple of shows out of the gate, one is our Hanukkah show. Well, it's eight white people because it's been eight white people since we did it in 2003,
Sure.
and it's
Yeah.
the same people. But there's no reason that we have to keep choosing shows that limit the the option of multi of a diverse cast. And
Yeah.
I've also realized too, sometimes with these movies, like with our sing-alongs, maybe having a daughter in this poli-sci women's lib, she's really active in advocacy and following in AOC's footsteps and all that. I do
Yeah.
kind of look at movies in a different lens too. We've shown Beauty and the Beast a bunch of times, and for the first time I watched it and went, do we really need to keep telling this
Yeah.
story? You
Yeah.
know?
He
That
basically kidnaps her, right? I
I
mean,
know, right?
I know it's so bizarre. All
Isn't it?
those
And those
yeah, all
lenses that you see things through, it starts to change. And the colloquialism is, "Oh, we're so woke." And I'm not trying to diminish it, but it is like, "Okay, white people, you gotta wake up." Because if you are the ones with the option of doing the producing, you've gotta make the choices that are serving your entire community. So, we're working on it, and it's a learning curve for everybody.
yeah, it is funny just how, um, the tide of the culture sweeps you up, and especially as white cultures, white dominant cultures. Well, me being, half Mexican, half white, right? So I kind of like always have danced the line and seen that kind of like stuff. But I even remember just the bias that we form. And one of the things I always kind of joke about is like with the Lion King,
Mm,
everybody sings that song so happy, like, it's my problem free philosophy.
right?
But that's actually completely antithetical of what the message of the movie is, right? Where
Right.
you're supposed to own and take responsibility, but
Yeah.
everybody sings the song,
That's the takeaway. Yeah.
which is so funny. So there's those kind of things that happen that have a nice tune that you catch for culture that you think are going on, and you don't really notice what the message is that the song that you're humming, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
God, we've done Grease the sing along 100 times. And I had a mom finally write to me one time and she said, "Hey, is it appropriate for my 8-year-old?" And I was like, "No." Even though people bring their kids all the time, like your perspective just changes and you go, "Please, I'm sorry. They're talking about some really naughty things in here. I don't think we
Yeah.
should do that." And maybe it goes over their heads, but I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
we're excited about one other program that I haven't we haven't told anybody about this, and I've been
Okay,
trying to
cool,
figure out
exclusive.
right. I've been trying to figure out how to kind of make this happen because it's going to need some groundwork first.
Yeah,
And I kind of feel like maybe I'll just pick up all your magazines and use that as a resource. Okay, so
sure. Yeah.
we've been toying with this idea called San Jose Stories.
Oh, cool.
This sort of started back when Dr. Sarah Cody was giving all of her daily press briefings,
Mhm.
and we would see her, kind of on the mic on stage, telling us what was going on, and I was like, I wonder what she's like. I wonder because this is all we see. We just see this one moment in time of
Right,
her,
yeah,
or you'd watch Sam Liccardo, Mayor
right.
Liccardo, getting up there, talking, doing that, and you're like, wonder what he's like. And
Yeah,
then my Instagram fills up with Sushi Confidential, right? Love all their great
yeah,
posts about all the food they serve. And I'm like, I wonder what the owner is like. And Scott and I sat there and went, well, why don't we find out? Why don't we create using Theater 2 that we've just renovated, which is more of a cabaret setting of,
yeah,
tables and chairs and really intimate, got a little stage in there. There's even a piano. And this idea has started to grow of what if we did a one act, a first 20-minute interview sort of thing
Yeah.
with people in San Jose that we want to get to know,
That's
stories
cool.
about the people in our community. But then we'd take a brief break, we'd come back, and our actors would improvise their story and they would tell their story in a highly
Oh,
improvised musical way, and they'd have like a little show about them.
that's awesome. So then you would have somebody interviewed, and
Uh-huh.
then the actors would be kinda listening, and then they would do an improv
Yep.
of that story. Oh, that's kinda cool. That's a
Yeah.
great idea. That
And
sounds fun.
it sounds great. And like having Tom McHenry be our inaugural person and everybody getting to listen to his great stories. Cause we've gotten to know Tom over the
Yeah.
time that we were trying to produce his play, A Statue for Bally Bunyan. Plug. And I hear stories that I know people would want to hear. But I
Yeah.
also, it's not just about our local celebrities per se. I want to know about the person down the street, Nathan.
Yeah.
Do you know who I mean when I say Nathan? He's the fellow who used to be a greeter at Camera 12 and he's
Oh,
often at
sure.
Cinequest.
Nathan
Wouldn't
Louis, yeah.
wouldn't you love to get to know him on a
Yeah,
more
he's yeah.
like on a different level? So that we want to really run the gamut. And so I think what we're going to start is maybe a nominating process where people can say, you have got to interview this person. They've got great stories and everybody should know more about this person in our community. And
That's cool.
yeah, and it might start off as like a monthly thing, maybe it'll grow. But this idea of mixing people's stories with improvisation is not a new one. But I think the idea of focusing in on our community and really getting to make them stars, for an evening and get to
Yeah.
share their stories. And I think kind of where your question to me came from is, well, what have you learned in the past year? What's happened? Everyone's got a lot of what's gone on, and being able to share that and walk in each other's shoes for a bit in a
Yeah.
really interesting, entertaining way, and to create some light and joy, I think would be kind of a neat series.
Yeah, that sounds fun. Well, that's cool. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. I know that I'm using this too much, but you guys are superheroes and champions, and keep it up. And thank you for taking time to talk to us. And I look forward to. Well, are you going to be working the ticket booth or anything coming up?
Right? You might see me. I might
I might
actually
see
show
it.
up. Scott
Yeah,
is
yeah.
Scott is dead set on trying to get an Oscar party going on April 25th. We're
Oh,
trying to
okay.
see we're working tomorrow to see if we can get the stream happening of actually having the live coverage
Oh,
of the
wow.
Oscars. And but it's going to be come as you are, because I will be come in your
Yeah, yeah,
pajamas. So
yeah. Totally.
hopefully we'll be able to announce that soon. But and Daniel, thank you. I mean, it's
Oh,
been
sure.
we're just kind of getting to know each other over the
Yeah,
years and learning more about what each other do. And we would love to host one of your pickup parties. We would love to come to them.
that would be
So,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's going to be, I think that's like the parting words of all of this is that once we get the go, I don't think there's going to be any stopping the creative
yeah.
people. We're going to be so
Totally.
raring to entertain and to experience things with other people that it's going to be the Roaring Twenties.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for all your hard work and your perseverance, and for what you're doing for you, and the business level, and what you do for Allie and your family. I just applaud you and thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.
Talk to you later.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye. To find out more about 3Below Theaters and their programs and the movies, go to their website, 3belowtheaters.com, and follow them on Instagram at 3Below Theaters. Thank you for listening to the Content Magazine podcast. Follow us on social media at Content Mag. Visit our website to become a member and help us to continue to tell the stories of the local creatives. This episode's music is Tang by Chris Inman, who is featured in issue 13.2. Follow him on Spotify at Chris Inman and on Instagram at chris.inman, as well as his record label, Orange Label Records.